welcome everybody back to the LDRship Podcast. I'm Dion Dixon, the resident Libertarian here, and I am joined by Democrats Will Atkins and Thea Ali. And we apologize for being gone for a little bit. Unfortunately, Brett Miller, our Republican on the panel, is no longer able to do the podcast with us. We will continue to do the podcast without him. It'll be a little bit tougher for us to make sure that the Republican side, the conservative side of things are represented during our discussions, but we will make every effort. And in the meantime, we are trying to find another Republican to join us here on the panel so that we can bring that voice in to our discussions. The reason that we are meeting tonight, this is kind of off schedule for what we normally would do. It's because today is September 12th, and as we're recording, and 2 days ago, Charlie Kirk was shot and killed on a college campus in Utah. I think anybody watching, listening to this podcast probably knows who Charlie Kirk is, but just in case you don't, he is a conservative activist. At the age of 18, he co-founded and became the CEO of an organization called Turning Point USA. And that organization's goal is to bring conservative viewpoints into high school and college campuses. He's most famous, I think. A lot of our viewers and listeners probably would have seen or heard him on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram Reels, where he sets up a table and a tent on a college campus with the sign that says "Change My Mind," and he brings a microphone and asks people who have differing opinions from him to come up and debate him on things. It's actually very similar in at least idea to what we're trying to do here, which is to bring people of differing political views together and discuss the issues and discuss the merits of the issues rather than just yell at each other. So all three of us were very much affected by this. It was quite shocking that it even happened, and of course the way that it happened as well was quite shocking. So let me turn it over to you, Will, because I think you were one of the first ones that kind of reached out, and I saw your posts on Facebook. So why don't you talk about what you were feeling?
Yeah. Like you said, the reason that we do this podcast is, we've mentioned it in earlier episodes that there's far more that bring us together than drive us apart. We're much closer than people might realize. That if we could put people of differing viewpoints in the same room and just have civil discourse, we could kind of understand where the other side is coming from. And so while we were kind of on hiatus, when we were talking offline, Dion and Thea, this was before you got in the room, back in like the 2003 timeframe when the beheading videos came out, I made the mistake of watching one of those, and it messed me up. And scrolling through Facebook on Wednesday, without really any trigger warning or anything, I saw the shooting video, and that of Charlie Kirk, and that one messed me up too. And something that we are all here doing this podcast, it obviously means a lot to us to have civil discourse like this. And while I strongly disagree with almost everything that Charlie Kirk says, he shouldn't have been killed for that. It has no place. And in the immediate aftermath, just seeing reactions from both sides, and I'm not innocent in all of this either. I put some stuff out there in the heat of the moment that I have since kind of walked back. That we should be able to all agree that violence, political violence, murder is never the answer, regardless of how strongly you disagree with something that someone says, regardless if you think they're instigating violence. So it's, working through all of that on Wednesday was kind of, the impetus for me reaching out to us to say, you know what, like we need to get back out there and have this discussion, for ourselves just as much as anyone else, but to kind of show that these kinds of discussions are worth having, that, we can have this kind of civil discourse about really inflammatory, really big things that are going on in our country.
I think, to your point, Will, that you brought up about the things that were going on with both sides. It was shocking to me seeing the different reactions. On the one hand, there are people on the far left who were posting TikTok videos and Instagram reels where they were happy, they were cheering, they were elated that he was dead, and I was just like, wow, like how can you be joyous that a human being has been murdered? Especially, it was a pretty brutal way too. So I don't know if you guys saw what I saw was that it was a 30-06 rifle. And for people who don't really know firearms and calibers of bullets, a 30-06 is what you use to go like big game hunting. Like you would take down an elk or a moose with a 30-06. That is it, using that on a human being is like taking out a fly with a sledgehammer. So it was like, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's sick. But yeah, the people on the left say, oh, like good, and he deserved it and all that stuff, I thought was awful. And then also what I found equally disturbing was the people on the right who basically, I mean, I think they were rightfully angry, but to then come out and say, okay, this means war, you guys have unleashed the dragon, like all these kinds of things. I was like, well, clearly you guys didn't understand Charlie Kirk's message either, because time after time after time, he would, like, you can find the videos where he's saying, we absolutely have to have civil discourse, because when we stop talking to each other, that's when things get violent. And so the last thing that he would want is for people to take up arms and start acting violently in his name. That's so, yeah, that part, in addition to the actual murder, like the immediate aftermath of it, just really got to me.
Yeah, and that was, so I made 2 posts and I've walked both of them back, but the latest one was essentially, I mean, we all served in the military, right? And we've got friends on both sides of the aisle and across the entire spectrum. And it was one of the disturbing things for me was seeing a lot of my friends, my conservative friends, talking about how they're going to go kill lefties. And I was like, dude, that's me. Like, you're talking about killing me over, a policy disagreement, or, so that was, it's been disturbing on a lot of different levels. And I agree with you. Same on the left, people who are cheering, the world's a better place without him, that kind of stuff. Like the left has often in the Trump era, both 1.0 and 2.0, been like, the cruelty is the point. And what about the humanity of putting people in cage? We talk this big game about humanity sometimes. And then when something like this happens, it's like we lose that sense of humanity for someone on the right.
Yeah, I think for me, that's like the thing that I really struggled with, because so if you had asked me prior to 2 days ago about Charlie Kirk, I would have been like, fuck that guy. Like, that would have been my response. I've, every time he's ever come up in my feed or come up, in my universe, it was always for a statement that he was making or something that he had said that I found personally abhorrent. And
Particularly
so,
a black woman, yes?
especially like, he made very, just to me, what I perceive to be racist comments about Black women specifically. And I felt like he was just somebody who was just, pouring fuel on the flames of division. I didn't particularly find him to be genuine when it came to the idea of, his whole prove me wrong, bro kind of situation. Like, but it's so I say all of that to say I had no love for him, and he was not somebody that I had any respect for, or even like there are voices on the right where I like to kind of plug into what they're saying just so I can feel like I have my finger on the pulse, and he was not one of them because I thought he was so far to the right. That being said, my instant reaction when I heard about him being killed was just like rage, because I was like, oh my God, seriously, like why, like that, like why are we doing this? Like, why are we, and I say we as a country, not we as Democrats or liberals. And I'm like, why do we think like this isn't the solution to anybody's problems? And all we're doing is making whatever the problem is worse by resorting to violence. And I just had this visceral, like, anger and resentment towards whoever did this for what. And I didn't even care. It wasn't even one of those like that I assumed that it was someone who shared my political ideology that did it. I just was like, whoever they are, I don't even care who they are, why they did it. I don't care if I'm blamed as a liberal. Like, I just was mad that it happened. And, I am someone, I have kids, I have a family. I recognize the humanity of people, right? And I just feel like you don't get to only be mad when it's someone who is on your team that is harmed, right? Like, if you have certain principles and ideals, you have to stand by them. And what really makes something your core value and your core principle is that you stand by it even when it applies to somebody who you don't, that's not on your team. And that's kind of how I felt about what happened the other day. And I'm still struggling because, like you guys are talking about, I've seen the reactions online. And believe you me, I've definitely seen a lot of the like, don't cry for me, Argentina. Like, why am I supposed to care that this guy got killed? Look at all the hateful things he said. And I understand where that's coming from, especially because this particular individual had such, made comments about empathy is basically for fools. You know what I mean? Like, he was someone who championed the idea that we don't have to be empathetic. So I think a lot of people are throwing back his words, his ideals in the conversation. But again, if you're going to use his words, then you're no better. Right? Like, you don't get to have the moral high ground in this argument if you're going to just stoop to the lowest level and say, well, this guy didn't care about me, so I don't have to care about him. And I don't agree with that. I think that the humanity of anybody is worth mourning the loss of. You know what I mean? And I don't care that I didn't agree with him. I don't think that I guess it still bothers me that somebody killed him. And it's weird because it feels like, why do I have to defend that? That it bothers me that somebody murdered another person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, Thea, and I think, Will, you were alluding to this too. The clips, audio and video clips that you guys have seen are, I think, different than what I see in my feed. And I didn't follow Charlie Kirk. I would say that I was probably neutral on him. But he did show up in my feed every now and again. And all the ones that kind of showed up in my feed were kind of the I would call them the positive takes on Charlie Kirk. So they were the ones
Yeah.
where I would see him like welcome a transgender person to the microphone, and then when people would start like booing or heckling in the audience, he would be like, no, please be respectful, let this person speak, and we're here to hear different ideas and things like that, right? And then after talking to that person, be like, well, you and I disagree, but that's okay, thank you for coming up here, I know it took a lot of courage, I appreciate you, those kinds of things. Those were like the videos that I would see. And I know the videos that you guys are referencing, the ones that paint him in not as pleasing a light. And I think it's kind of funny that both of those were him, but
Yes.
one side is only seeing the curated positive version and one side is kind of only seeing the curated negative version. And this kind of goes back to our episode when we talked about the media and the bias. And when our feeds are very much curated towards us personally, I could see where people on the left would, when they only are presented with a certain caricature of Charlie Kirk, they're like, well, yeah, fuck that guy, like he deserved to die. Like I mean, I can't excuse somebody thinking that about another human being, but I can see where the vitriol comes from if that's the only side you ever see. And then likewise on the right, I can see where if you never saw those parts, like I know he was accidentally caught on tape in like 23 saying that he thought the Civil Rights Act was a mistake and things like that, right? A lot of people on the right have never even heard that. Like that has never popped up in their feed. They don't even know, and when they hear about it, they think that it's fake news, right? So and so I could see on the right where they go, no, this guy was a saint. Like he was God's man and he preached God's word and everything. And why would they come out, right? And so, I mean, obviously that's part of the problem, is that we have this style of media that completely bifurcates us, and there's like no connecting tissue there at all.
Well, and so I think this has come up sometimes even in our discussions where, and this is where I wish Brett was still here, because there have been times where Brett would make comments and I'd be like, oh, I'm not even aware of that on the left, right? Of like things that there was a perception that the left felt a particular way about something. And then me as someone who my media diet or my social media or whatever, that's not even something that was on my radar, right? I think a good example of that would be that jeans ad from that actress. I forget her name.
Sydney Sweeney.
Come on.
Yeah, Sydney Sweeney. And I was not aware of this ad at all, right? Like and if I had seen it, it would have just gone in my mind and out of my mind. I didn't care. The first time I was aware that there was an issue with the ad was when I think it was Megyn Kelly went in on how the left had this unreasonable take on this ad. And I was like, are we offended by this ad? And then I sought out the ad and looked at it and I was like, well, I don't really care. I don't think it's a big deal. But then it stayed in my feed because I was seeing conservative commentators responding to this alleged controversy from the left that I never even knew existed as someone on the left, right? So I think it speaks to what you said about someone like Charlie Kirk. If he was doing things that were benign or not that controversial, it wasn't getting the attention of the left. When they would pay attention to him is when he would say something that would push a button. And then on our side, that's the only time he's making it into my feed, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so you're right. My perception of him was very negative. I think the only time, because I remember watching the Republican National Convention, and I think he was like the opening speaker. And I remember being like, really, this is the guy you bring out? And I remember being confused as to why was this someone who was being legitimized in that setting. But like you said, I realized because some of his more controversial views weren't the thing that he was known for on the right. You know what I mean? And it speaks to the issue that we are having with, we live in our own bubbles. And because most people don't seek out a way to, do the Venn diagram where your bubble overlaps with somebody else's bubble or burst your own bubble, ignorance is bliss. You don't even realize that you aren't getting the full picture, because why would you? You know what I mean?
When you're talking about, like, you didn't realize that we were supposed to be upset about the jeans ad.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you hear that everyone on the left is pissed off about something, and you're like, wait, I'm on the left. Like, I'm missing out. Like,
did I miss something?
What am I supposed to be
answering? The newsletter? Did the bat signal not go up? Like, what's going on?
And that is always, like, one of the folks on my feed was like, the left fetishizes violence, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah, I saw that comment.
I need to go research on how we fetishize violence, because apparently I'm missing out on something, But
you're not subscribed to that OnlyFans channel.
No, I'm not on that one. But when we've had our discussions before about other policies, one of the things that I always one of my critiques about the right is the hypocrisy, right? Like, if you're going to think one thing first, that's fine. Have your principles, stick to it, apply it equally. So there were, when we're talking about, like, well, he was, like Dion, you had brought up, he was a father. He had kids, a wife and kids that are now, without Charlie. And a lot of folks on the right are like, you should mourn that. You should, but I understand where the left is coming from when they're like, well, where was all of that when the speaker in Minnesota was killed? Like that is a perfectly valid, and you're right. He was a family man, and we should mourn the family.
One of the clips that, I'll give a compliment and then I'll point out a negative. I will say that there were the Utah governor.
Yeah.
I think that he has really done a good job and his best at trying to have a message of the dangers of the division and being divisive and how you communicate about this tragedy. And I will commend him, because you can hear in his voice the frustration and the struggle, but I appreciate the effort he's making. Even Speaker Johnson, in his way, I think he gave a similar message. But then there was a clip of Joni Ernst, and I'm not a fan to begin with, right? And
retired Lieutenant Colonel Joni Ernst.
I know. That's part of why I have such a problem with.
For the audience, retired Lieutenant Colonel. Go ahead.
But it was such an opportunistic moment, because she's like, the left has to own this, and the left is and she, and then very quickly, whoever the reporter was in her presence quickly was like, well, if the left owns this killing, then doesn't the right own the killing of the representative in Minnesota? And she was so offended by that question, but it highlighted that the ridiculousness of her position in that moment, right? And you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to blame the other side when something bad happens to my team, but then I don't want to take ownership when something bad happens to the other side. And I don't express empathy when it's happened to someone else, because I did feel like I think we talked about it on our podcast, there was a lack of empathy for the loss of the representative, the former speaker from Minnesota. And in that instance, especially, somebody broke into her home and killed her husband, her child, her dog. And to me, like, I don't care. Again, like, that should have elicited horror on the part of anyone who has humanity. In the same way, the fact that here it is, Charlie is sitting here at a college campus, interacting with college students and gets a bullet to the neck, like, that should elicit horror. And to me, if that doesn't elicit horror in you, there is something that has broken inside of you that we need to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, it means that you have embraced the dehumanization of your opponents or of the other side. And that's always a dangerous thing.
I wonder if part of the reason is that Charlie Kirk's murder was on video, right? There was a lot more outcry with Luigi Mangione as well, because we had video of that, and it seems like the things that we have video of that we can watch this terrible thing happening just generate more emotion than things that you just read about, especially like if you're not from Minnesota, right? You kind of go, oh, I think I can, point to Minnesota on a map. I think I know where that is, right? Kind of thing. So, and that sucks, right? Like whether you see it or just read about it, you should at heart be like, well, that was another human being with a family.
And that's 100%. Like my response would have been, I'm positive, would have been very different had I not accidentally watched that video. It messed me up, and I have started to see like pictures of the school shootings are starting to come out now. Like if you have that kind of reaction because of how gruesome the Charlie Kirk video was, you should be having the same reaction for all of these school shootings. And then now people are putting pictures up from, bloodbaths in the school, and like my feed is not doing well anymore. Like, I've messed up my algorithm for life.
I guess at first I was going to push back, but I think you're right, because I remember watching the George Floyd video, and that was the last of one of these videos that really because I was fortunate enough. I was working a couple of days ago. So by the time I heard about what had happened to Charlie, I already knew not to go. I already knew to censor myself and not go seek out the video and avoid any clips. But I remember I didn't have that same fortune when it came to George Floyd. The video, it was on my feed, and I watched it not knowing what I was looking at. And it was like, oh my God, and that hit me in again, like, to watch someone lose their life is, I think it should, like I said, I think the word horror, I don't use it lightly. It's horrifying. You know what I mean? And I don't want to believe that when people say, oh, words beget violence, I mean, short of saying you go shoot that person, I don't necessarily agree with the idea that controversial takes beget violence, right? Like I, as much as I don't agree with what Charlie Kirk said specifically about Black women, I don't necessarily think that would justify a Black woman shooting him in the neck. Had to shoot him. You know what I mean?
So let me play the Republican then. If that's true, Thea, that short of saying you go shoot that person, that words shouldn't beget violence, does the right have a point with the Trump incitement of violence at the Capitol? That he never, he did, but he didn't. Like, we on the left have said Trump incited the violence, and folks on the right are like, no, he didn't.
I guess I would. So I'll take the bait that you're giving me. My issue has, and this is where I've been consistent. My issue has always been not so much what Trump did to incite January 6th. It's what he didn't do to stop it when it was happening. And I think I said in previous podcasts that it was a failure of leadership to not do everything possible once whatever was happening to stop it. As a leader, and that's always been my position, was it was a failure of leadership. Now, if you see something coming and then you poke the bear, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's where I see with Trump. Now, when he says things like Liz Cheney should be put in front of a firing squad or whatever, things like that, to me, because of his platform and because of the level of dedication that his I don't want to call them followers, but supporters
because
have.
Of his position.
His position, I hold him to a different standard than I hold to Charlie Kirk, right? So, and so to me, okay, the president No, like there's certain, like you just have to be held to a higher standard.
But
Or
in
any elected
theory,
official,
in
yeah,
theory,
I'm
I
going to hold you to a
agree,
different.
except that Charlie Kirk's audiences and followers are just as high. I mean, arguably just as
But
high.
I'm going to say that the Rush Limbaughs of Limbo, whatever, of previous generations, all the way to the Charlie Kirks, they are provocative. Like that's what makes them relevant, right? Is to be provocative. That's their job. That is a very different role from being an elected official representing the United States of America. Yeah. And so when we're talking about the actions of our elected officials, I do hold them to a higher standard. And maybe I shouldn't, maybe that's naive of me to do so, but I do. And so that's where I struggle when I see them doing, because even let's talk about Trump and his response to this particular shooting. I give him this much, in that as someone who has had someone close to me murdered, I understand that is a unique position to be in, right? It's a different kind of grief than when someone dies of natural causes, of an illness, even in a car accident. But I had a childhood friend murdered and that was different, and it there's a level of anger and feeling of unjust. So I get there's a human element to his reaction. However, you're still the president of the United States, and you should have enough people around you to say, hey, take a step back. Before you make this statement, you need to, again, consider what it means. And to vilify the left, this amorphous left, that we had before you even knew who the shooter was and what their motivations were. And then to continue, the other problem I have with him is that he continues to conflate in a disingenuous way past wrongs as being things that the left is responsible for. And I mainly point to the assassination and attempt on his life. That was how many months ago now? Almost a year ago, right? Since that happened. And at the end of the day, there's been no evidence that shooter was motivated had a liberal ideology or was motivated by, any kind of liberal cause per se. Yet Trump continues to blame the left for that assassination attempt. And I think that's disingenuous and unfair. And then to do the same in this moment, again, I find it to be a failure of leadership, and that's me being generous.
Yeah, Thea, I agree with you. I mean, the president of the United States, once you take office, you are the president of the United States. You're not just the president of the Republicans or the president of the Democrats. So regardless of how many people voted against you, you're still their president too. So I agree with you there. But I want to pull on a slightly different thread than what you pulled on, Will, trying to take the side of the Republicans. And this is something that I've heard the past couple of days where I'm pretty sure it's mostly been on the left where you hear this phrase, words are violence. I don't think people on the right have been saying that, because I think the people on the right are the ones saying, oh, you're a bunch of snowflakes and you can't handle real life and stuff. But, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, where if you say that words are violence, then, the response, a rational response to violence is violence. Right. And so if you can say in your mind, well, if somebody says angry words at me, that's violence, then I can respond by punching them or whatever, and I think that's a dangerous path for us to go down. Right. Words are the best and really the only thing that we have to guard against violence, because if we can't talk to each other, then what other method is there for us to resolve differences?
Yeah. So historically, the left are the ones who have always said that words are violence. We have to have trigger warnings and safe spaces, and you saying a racist thing or a homophobic thing or whatever is attacking, is violence on me. In general, I have not agreed with that necessarily. To your point, Dion, I would almost be like, okay, look, if you feel that words are violence, to me, like that might be like psychological abuse, or like there's a difference between physical violence versus psychological violence versus whatever. So if the rational response, as you put it, is of violence, it's violence in turn, then you have the right to verbally assault me back. Like if I verbally assault you, you can verbally assault me back. If I call you a racist term, you can't shoot me. Like
like you and I are on the same wavelength, but like, if words are violence, right? Okay. So like my wife is 5 feet tall and does not weigh a lot. Right. And so if a very large person were to physically attack her, it's just not going to work out in her favor if she tries to respond with equal physical force, right? Because she's going to get her butt kicked. And so that's an instance where it's like, I don't have the same physical ability as you to equalize the force, and so I'm going to have to pull out a gun or pull out a knife or something, because that's the only way I'm going to survive that. Now, if words are violence and you don't feel like you have the mental capacity to spar in this manner, you may have to resort to a different weapon.
So what you're saying is that because people feel frustrated that they can't argue back, they're going to shoot them?
I will say,
I'm trying to get in the mindset.
I will say as someone, so, okay, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I'm not going to let the left own this idea that words are violence, because a certain Supreme Court justice once said that he had suffered a virtual lynching by virtue of being accused of doing things that he said he didn't. And I remember, I've never forgiven Clarence Thomas for using the word lynching, because lynching it is such a violent act. And to compare being accused of sexual harassment to somehow being lynched, I have never let that go. So I will say that the premise of saying that words somehow equal violence is not necessarily unique to the left. And I just gave one example. But I will also agree with Will that I think on the left, and I'm someone who has also, because military, I have struggled with my fellow progressives when there is this visceral response to hearing words that are offensive as if they were an act of actual violence, because I'm like, no, either you don't understand violence, or you just really can't, you lack the tools in your toolbox or the resilience to be able to withstand hurtful words, but recognize that they are very different. And I've always found it insulting, because there are people who actually have suffered from violent acts in those same spaces, right? So like when you talk about dehumanizing words towards the trans community, there are unfortunately many people in the trans community that have suffered physical violence as a result of their identity. And I think it's demeaning to them and their experiences to compare someone saying something you don't like to them, taking physical action against you. All of that coming back to what you said, Will. Now, not Will, I'm sorry, what you said, Dion. As someone who, before we got on the pod, I was talking about like one of my mentors who has a sharp tongue. And I am a product of that. So I too have a sharp tongue. And there have been times where I have been accused of, I have had people react to me and my sharp tongue in like wanting to fight me or getting physically aggressive towards me because they don't have the ability to best me through words. And I know, and I have been the person who's like, oh, clearly I hit a button. I'm sorry. You need to calm down, because I see that someone wants to fight me because of something that I've said. And I've always thought that person was unreasonable in those moments. And here, so that's why I too will have never bought into this idea that words are violence. Now, I think words have meaning. And the thing that I have a problem with is when you dehumanize people through your words. You make it easier for somebody else to turn a blind eye when violence is committed against them. And I do think that that is a problem that needs to be addressed. But the words themselves, I don't think equate to violence.
So let me take the Republican position again then. If words have meaning and using words that dehumanize people makes it easier to accept the violence against them, that whole line of thinking, then as Democrats, as people on the left, when we call Charlie Kirk...
I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Dion, can you hear me? It's you, yep. Thea. Oh.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Your network.
We got network disruption. Okay, she's good now.
She's good now.
I'm good now. Sorry. Repeat.
So if those words have meaning, then do we as Dems, when we call Charlie Kirk a Nazi, are we guilty of the same dehumanizing? Well, if he's actually a Nazi, then shooting him, I would like to shoot Nazis. But are we guilty of the same thing?
I think yes, on its face, and yes, because, and which is why I have, I've been very careful, especially on this podcast, but in general, with labeling someone in a way that allows you to dismiss their humanity. And I think when you call somebody a Nazi, now outside of the person who claims to be a neo-Nazi, well, like if you own the term, then but
you got a swastika. I get to call
you got a swastika tattooed on your arm. Well, guess what? You live by that. You die by that. But my point, I feel like, yes, we have to be very careful about what we say and how we say it, because then we become the thing that we are trying to argue against. Right. And that's why I've always been, and I don't know if I've always been, but in recent years, I've been hesitant to use certain labels. Now, the flip side is authoritarian, fascist, socialist, whatever. These words have meaning, but they have definitions that are so that I won't accept saying that someone is exhibiting fascist tendencies is the same as calling someone a Nazi, because the Nazi party, it's not that they were just fascist, it's that they executed the Holocaust. Right. You know what I mean? They were cruel. And so I think that there's a difference, there's space between what terms are dehumanizing and which terms are just a definition for a particular set of actions.
Yeah. And I'm guilty. I am relatively sure that I threw around the Nazi term a bit more or too much in the past. And it was actually my Jewish friends who were like, dude, if they're not exterminating a people, stop calling them Nazis. Like that is.
And that's, yes, I think that's.
Belittling's not quite the right word, but like that is minimizing what the Nazi party was, especially the Jewish people, when you start saying that someone who is exhibiting fascist tendencies or the policies, that you just don't like by calling them a Nazi. And that, for me, that was what made it stick for me.
And I agree, because there are other fascists in history that didn't earn, we don't know the name of their parties. Right. Why do we know who the Nazis were? Because of the atrocities that they committed upon the Jewish people.
Right.
And so as much as I disagree at times with the current administration and their mass deportations, do I believe that when they are snatching people off the streets, they're sending them to a gas chamber and exterminating them? No.
Right.
So then why am I using that term? The term that implicates that type of behavior, right? And so I agree. And so, I think we have to be aware. Now, the thing that sucks, though, is there are times where people can draw parallels to the actions of the Nazi Party before they got to the Holocaust and where we are now. And you can say, this is where the Nazis were at this stage, long before they got to the worst. But if we're looking at their playbook, we're seeing parallels. That, I think, is more fair if it's a genuine comparison and not just.
But I think the problem that faces the left right now is that we've now had, I think, darn near 10 years, because I think it was in late 2015 that Trump announced he was going to run. So I think we've had about a decade of sort of this, the boy who cried wolf kind of, we're going to throw out racist, fascist, Nazi, whatever. And so now, so I will say, as a libertarian, Trump 1.0 was a lot more benign than Trump 2.0 looks like it is, right? So if you wanted to draw, if somebody were sitting there and actually analyzing, the German nation state between World War I and World War II and what led to the rise of the Nazi Party, and they wanted to make genuine analysis and comparison between that and America in 2025, I think unfortunately they are faced with the fact that there's just a large portion of the electorate who are just yeah, we've heard this before. Okay,
exactly.
Yeah,
it's the boy who cried wolf.
And they don't pay attention.
Yeah.
And that's why in 2016, I remember feeling this sense of, just oh, don't do this. Or be careful, because again, words matter. And this is where my profession in particular, right? I was in law school in 2016, then I graduated and I've been a lawyer ever since. And I sit there and I will look at a brief when I'm trying to make a point, and I could spend an hour editing one paragraph, because how I say whatever I'm trying to say before the court, I know it matters. And I know the words that I choose matters. And I know if I say something is X and it's not really X, but I'm trying to be, that I lose credibility. And I think that that's where the left has struggled. And, now that we are a year past, this, when Kamala Harris came into the election and everything a year ago, I can look back on it. Her book's coming out. That's got to be a topic for a future podcast.
Are you going to make me read the book? But I can
look back I know, I guess I have to read it, right? But I look back at some of the things that were said during the campaign, and I think, did we overplay our hand?
And that's what I hear the most now during Trump 2.0 is every time the left brings something up that has an echo of what we said during Trump 1.0, the right says, oh, come on, you guys said that, last time too. And, the democracy survived and nothing happened. And we're always left with yeah, but by how close, how January 6th wasn't it could have turned out differently, but because it didn't, there's this the ability for the right to be you're overblowing it just like you did last time.
So what's interesting I've found is that, to me, I watch both parties seem to look at the other one having control of the nation as a completely existential crisis. America as we know it is going to end the next time these guys, those guys over there, take power. However, I would say that somehow the Republicans, at least this time, really seemed to make that message resonate with the electorate way more than the Democrats did. And I think it's because of COVID. Because, COVID feels like a long time ago now, but I think as we were gearing up towards that election, people were remembering that it was Joe Biden and it was Gavin Newsom and all these others that were, shutting down businesses and keeping people from going to church and, that kind of thing. And so somehow the Republican Party was able to be see, this is the existential threat we were talking about. You can't let this happen again. I don't know why that's. I don't know how they managed to capitalize on that message and the Dems didn't, but also we kind of have strayed very far away from our original topic.
Well, no, yes and no.
Yes
and no. I don't think we have, because we talk about political violence, and I think that political violence is based in fear, right? That the person who chooses to engage in violence, they're coming from a place of fear and belief that there's this existential threat to their well-being, right? And to their way of life. And so what you're speaking to is how well one party was able to capture that fear and anxiety versus another, right? And I think that, and then how do you discuss these topics without being a fearmonger, without fearmongering? You know, like, how do we engage in political discussion without fearmongering, without stoking the fears of the person out there who will see this and say, oh, I have no choice but to kill X, Y, and Z, or to I'm going to go kidnap Gretchen Whitmore, or I'm going to set the house of the governor of Pennsylvania on fire, or, name your whatever act. So I think it's an important thing to think about.
And those are the kinds of things. So when I think about that, like, okay, why do the Republicans think that the Democrats are going to, like, the country will end as we know it? And when I'm sitting here and I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about, that actually makes me reflect more on myself even than them. Like, that I'm missing something. I get that you don't like the Democratic policies. I get that you think they're socialist. I get that that Dems are not as good for your pocketbook. I get all of that, but none of that says the country's going to end, and that if you don't start killing people, I think this is where the us versus them. So one thing I thought I would start with that I didn't is, but I guess it's kind of implied here. So I came into my college experience from, I would say, even more progressive standpoint than probably what I have today. And I went to college, and I had the opposite academic experience of what people describe as going to an institution of higher learning, because I went to a very conservative college in the Air Force Academy. So when I got to college, and mind you, I went to college in the wake of 9/11, right? And so I found myself as a progressive in an environment with predominantly people who had predominantly conservative viewpoints in the wake of 9/11. And I was challenged, like, my perspective on everything in life was challenged by the people around me. But I don't know if I am on this podcast with you guys today, able to kind of stand my ground, but hear your points and everything, if I hadn't had that experience as a young person being challenged, and not always in a nice way. And I'm sure if anyone I went to the academy with, especially anyone who's a poli-sci major, remembers me and remembers how I used to talk in class, I was much more emotional and angry and combative in trying, because I always felt like my position was being attacked and was not being heard. I know I'm much better at making a persuasive argument today than I was 20 years ago. But I don't become this person had I not had that experience, right? And so part of why, with the whole Charlie Kirk of it all, is, for better or worse, part of what he was doing was just that very thing, challenging people on college campuses to think about why you believe what you believe, and then stand there and let somebody, like, poke holes in it, And I just think that is the core of who we are as Americans and what freedom of speech means. And if we can't handle that, then we've lost sight of what all these founding documents were intended to provide us as a society. And I don't know what hope we have. And that's what I think ultimately what scares me in this killing, is that it highlights that we've lost the ability to even engage with ideas that we don't agree with. Yeah, and I was going to mention earlier, like, So I too was not a big follower of Charlie Kirk, but I knew of him. I had seen some of his clips. And yeah, like I tend to agree. Like he was relatively, like he was calm and even tempered. And, you know, when I compare him to like the Ben Shapiro's, I'm like, you know, Ben Shapiro is worse than Charlie Kirk in that just how Ben Shapiro conducts his, because he does very similar, you know, he wants to kind of argue and have this back and maybe not a back and forth because he likes to own the conversation.
That's what I'm saying. I think the thing that made Charlie Kirk, love him or hate him, what I have to give him credit for was the engagement.
Right.
Was saying to someone, come prove me wrong.
Right.
Inviting someone to engage with him in a way that is uncomfortable. And sometimes he was condescending and not, you know, but not everybody even, you know, I feel like what I'm afraid of is that we've lost the ability to engage, or we're losing the ability to engage.
Yeah.
And instead of engaging, people resort to violence.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the things that I noted about what I had seen of Charlie Kirk's material is that I never witnessed any ad hominem attacks. He would always engage the issue, not the person. And again, we've already covered the fact that my feed looks different from yours. So maybe there are examples of ad hominem attacks in there.
I don't think he attacked the people he was talking to.
Talking to, but talking about are two different things. Yes.
Now
I agree with that.
Yeah, I do know that. Like, so
he was speaking.
He was very much open and honest about the fact that pretty much all of his arguments stemmed from his Christian faith. People who are more fundamentalist Christian than others are, you know, less accepting of transgender, of gay and lesbian, you know, those kinds of things. And so, you know, this is where like I would disagree with Charlie Kirk and his views. And I do have to say, though, so I don't know if you guys saw the tweet from Stephen King, the author, who said, you know, this guy literally said he wants to stone gay people to death. And then he had to walk that back because the one thing that he was referring to was actually an exchange between Charlie Kirk and this student. The student kind of brought the Bible and said, well, how can you believe these things? Because the Bible says this, this, and that about people. And, you know, how can you be against like gays and lesbians and stuff? And he was like, well, yes, that's true. But that very same book of the Bible that you're quoting right now, one chapter before, says this, and that's where it says, like, you know, if a man lies with another man, blah blah blah, stone them, etc. And that's what he said. He was basically saying to her, like, you can't pick and choose what you pull out of the Bible. But Stephen King took that and said he wants to stone gays, right? And so, like, I forget where I was going with that. I think a lot of times.
I mean, I hear you. But here's okay. So I'm going to push back. He made the comment that Black women lack the brain processing power to be taken seriously.
That's not in the Bible.
Yeah, no,
that was not based on his faith. That was not based on Christian values. It was just racist.
Yeah. And I will say I never saw that or heard that, but I trust that it's out there because I don't think you would make that up. So.
But that's where I say that I don't want. That's where I actually think it's important to acknowledge this was a flawed human being that people had good reason to despise. I don't even think we need to defend who he was as a person because I think he had the right to be that person. And that's my thing is like he said what I think are despicable things or undefensible things, but he still had the right to say them. And I'll fight to the death to say that he had those rights. Whether I liked him or not, he had the right to say them and should not have been subject to political violence as a result of saying them.
Same thing.
But I don't want to like characterize him as not being what he was, because he had the right to be what he was. It's just that the person who then took his life wasn't justified in doing so just because he may have said despicable things in his exercise of free speech.
So I guess to clarify, I was getting at the point that I think that's where the left sort of gets a lot of the like disparaging of entire groups of people, those kinds of quotes and everything. And like you said, I'm sure he said it. I think what I admire about Charlie Kirk was his method, right? Like, I did not agree with a good number of things that he said, especially from a political standpoint. Like, if he and I were discussing things Christian to Christian, that would be one thing. But I'm the kind of person who recognizes that the United States of America is not a theocracy. We do have to be accommodating of other beliefs, and there are some things that translate well from the Judeo-Christian faiths to a governing body, like thou shalt not murder. That's a good one. There are other things that don't necessarily translate well, and we need to know where those boundaries lie. But one of the things that I did admire him for was his method. That he came to a college campus and set up a table and asked people to come to a microphone. He didn't go with a bullhorn. He didn't go and speak at people. Like Will, you were talking about Ben Shapiro. His style is much more speaking at people. Whereas Charlie Kirk would ask people to speak to him. He wanted to hear their arguments. And he would debate them and pick apart their arguments and stuff. But it was the method was inviting, like the whole premises was to invite differing opinions to come at him. And that's something that I don't think that we just see very often in our society today.
I guess I wouldn't use the word admire. I guess I would just use, I guess I respected it. Okay. I respect it.
That's fair.
And I believe that is a better method than what I see in others, where there is not the ability to even engage with anyone that disagrees with them. And I think the lack of engagement is the poison in our society right now, is anyone who is unwilling to engage with someone who disagrees with them. And I see it in my life. I have people in my life who, my sister will never listen to this, so I'll use my younger sister. If you disagree with her, she cannot hear the perspective of someone who disagrees with her, period. And they are evil. The way she will vilify someone who disagrees with her, the way she will dismiss them. It's just like she shuts down and she's like, you're dead to me. You're evil, And I see her brain do it. And she's done it to me a couple of times, more on personal issues, not political issues. But for political issues, for sure, she, she's bisexual, she's bisexual. So for her, anyone who has an issue with her sexuality, she just thinks they're evil and the devil and they're, she has this like visceral reaction to them. And I'm like, you have to engage. And I bring this up because I think I've said this on the podcast before, but if I haven't, my dad's side of the family are very conservative, like they're like Southern Baptist Christians. So they struggle with the concept of bisexuality, and so there is a rift between her and members of our family based on her sexuality. And instead of her acknowledging their belief system and, trying to engage, she's like, it's just combative. And so so there's no healing, there's no reconciliation, there's no ability to come together because of the way that she responds to them. And I look at that in my life and I think she doesn't there's nothing, you don't win in doing that. You know what I mean? Like, because at the end of the day, now all you have is now you're estranged from your family, because you can't try to come to any kind of understanding or any kind of middle ground. And I don't think that my in defense of my conservative family, I don't think that they are the type to be hateful about, their lack of understanding of her sexuality, but they also aren't going to change their what they believe are their Christian beliefs, and what they believe the Bible says. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting, but it speaks to the larger issue. If you can't engage with someone who disagrees with you, then what's left?
So the only additional point I want to make there is Charlie Kirk. It's not that he didn't deserve to die because he engaged with people, because Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump, all these other people who don't engage with people also don't deserve to die for that lack of engagement. We appreciate or respect or whatever the fact that Charlie did engage in a kind of a meaningful way, but that's not what we're basing our being against the fact that he was murdered, even if he was a ginormous piece of shit and didn't engage with anybody. And, even if all of that, he still wouldn't have deserved to die.
I think I think it's like, if you're going to believe in the sanctity of human life, you got to believe in the sanctity of human life, even when it's a life that you have not benefited from or don't appreciate per se,
right.
And it is what it is. You have to be consistent. Else your values, are your values really a value? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think that's a good way for us to kind of end it. I think our consensus as a group is that regardless of who this man was, anyone who seeks to justify his murder, we condemn. And anyone who can't understand or acknowledge that his murder was, it's a negative, it's a pox on both our houses, so to speak. If you can't see that, then we implore you to kind of do some soul searching and think about what it is you really believe in and what it is you are really fighting for or championing, because to not acknowledge that a person shouldn't be murdered for their viewpoint, it's a slippery slope, and it's not where I personally want to be. And I think for all of us, that's the thing that worries me about the future of America. If we are at a point where we can't agree on, hey, we don't get to kill people because we disagree with their beliefs.
Yeah. All right. I'm conscious of the time. We've gone about 10 minutes past an hour now. So I think, Thea, why don't you start us off with what's been making you happy? And I think it doesn't have to be this past week, because this has been a rough week. It was the 24th anniversary of September 11th. It was also at the beginning of the week was when the video footage of the stabbing of Irina Zarutska came out. So that was tough to see. So it's been a very tough week. So if you have something that's been making you happy from before this week, that's fine, because we've been gone for a little while.
I'll go random. I binged the second season of Wednesday on Netflix last weekend into this week. And I really enjoyed it. And it brought me joy because it was nice for escapism. And so I guess what's making me happy is just the idea that I do still treasure the ability to just kind of escape through entertainment. And I'm such a movie and TV buff. And so I enjoyed the quirky nature of the second half of that show airing on Netflix. So that made me happy.
So you recommend Wednesday season 2?
liked it. So the first half, I recommend it now that the second half is aired. The first half of season 2 was but the second half I thought was better, and it brought it all together. And just the acting of Jenna Ortega, like chefs. I mean, I really like Christina Ricci as Wednesday, and I never would have said someone could take that mantle and make it their own, but I give her credit that she has owned it. Catherine Zeta-Jones is excellent as Morticia. It's good, and you don't have to really have any investment in the Addams Family to still enjoy the show. So it's my plug. It made me happy. It's simple. I don't have anything. I don't have anything deep.
I enjoyed season 1, so that season 2 is definitely on my watch list. But having somebody recommend it moves it higher up the queue. What about you, Will?
Yeah, definitely watch it all together. I don't like that they broke it up, but all together it's pretty good.
Yeah, the first episode did seem like it might drag a little bit to get going, but all right. So what's making me happy? To be honest, like this podcast, that the fact that we can come together, we can have these discussions. We don't talk about happy-go-lucky things often. Like, a lot of our topics are deep and people have visceral reactions to the topics that we talk about. And just the fact that, hey, if we can come together and do this, I'm a pessimist at heart, but it gives me some hope that other people in America can do the same. If enough people are out there modeling civil discourse, there's still hope out there. And I appreciate, I know I kind of texted out of the middle out of the blue. It was like, we need to come together. And so I appreciate the two of you like agreeing to kind of throw this together and have this discussion.
I wish we had ended on your what's making you happy. That would have been a great end to the episode.
Go ahead. So what Netflix show do you like?
No, I'm going to go a couple of weeks back. Our summer vacation, I think I alluded to this many, many, many episodes ago because I said, part of the fun of summer vacation is planning it. And we had planned it a long time ago. So we finally got to go to the Bahamas. We've been trying to get to the Bahamas for years now. And here's the beautiful thing. So we went to Grand Bahama, which is not really like the touristy island of the Bahamas. That's Nassau. One of the reasons we chose it is because it was cheaper, but also because my wife and son are very much introverts. They would much prefer to go to a place where there's like nobody around. They can just hang out on the beach, just go to the pool, whatever, and not be bothered by people. Well, so we get there. And there's like this is a resort that probably has like 1,000 rooms. It's got like 4 lodging buildings. There's like pools everywhere. There's restaurants everywhere, all this kind of stuff, right? We get there and there's like nobody around. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, did we pick like the rundown? Like, no, it turns out that a real estate developer had bought the property like a couple months ago and was planning on just like bulldozing everything and building a brand new like casino water park resort kind of thing, just like completely revitalizing that area of the beach. And so they stopped taking reservations a few months ago. And so they were just waiting for the people who had existing reservations to basically, and they kind of drew a line in the sand. They were like, okay, end of August, that's where we're going to shut everything down and start bulldozing. So we got there beginning of August. And like I said, this resort looked like it probably had about 1,000 rooms or so there. We saw maybe 3 or 4 other families the entire week that we were there. We had the entire pool and beach to ourselves. And like it drove me nuts a little bit the first couple of days because I'm a little bit more of a people person. But like by the end of the week, I was like, this is awesome. This is just like it was our own personal paradise, and it was such a great.
As long as there's still like people there to serve you, and you're not like
2 of the 4 restaurants were still open, so we could still get food. There was a local marketplace like right outside the property, so we could go to local bars and restaurants and things. Yeah, it was perfect. Like, so we had a fantastic summer vacation. My wife and son were especially grateful that they just didn't have to be bothered by other people for a week. So that's what's been making me happy. And then, of course, I did mention before, we have a puppy, and she has been a net joy in the house, though sometimes she still pees on the floor. So, all right. And with that,
we had to start taking ours to puppy daycare because it was too much.
With that, thank you all for sticking with us. We appreciate you viewing and listening to us. Please like and subscribe. That helps us. And also, please let us know if you have comments, if you have questions, if you want to talk about Charlie Kirk, if you want to talk about political violence, whatever it is that came to mind this episode. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Share us with your friends and family.
Or if you are a Republican and would like to engage in our conversations, we are actively looking for a fourth.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and if you think you have a place on this panel, let us know. We'd love to talk with you. So with that, we will continue to record these episodes without a Republican until we find somebody to fill that spot. Brett left some pretty big shoes to fill, but we're sure there's somebody out there that can come in and bring some civil discourse to us. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.